Morning, everybody. Out to the show our respect. First bow. Rise. Second bow. Rise. Third bow. Rise. Please be seated. All right, left leg over right thigh or right thigh over left leg. Or the full lotus flower positions. Okay. Right hand over left palm. Back straight, elbows out. Breathe in and out. Breathe in deeply and out. One more time. Breathe in and out. Visualize that the body is sitting here. You understand that the body is sitting here, the physical body. Visualize impermanence. One day the body will grow old. It will die. The bones and flesh will be separated. Everything will turn into fine dust. The wind blows through and takes it all away. There is nothing left remaining. Breathe in, you know you're breathing in. Breathe out, you know you're breathing out. Breathe in, Ami. Breathe out, all four. Breathe in all the positive energy. Breathe out all the stress and tension. Stress from your feet, your knees, your thighs, lower back, upper back, elbows, shoulders, neck. Breathe out all the stress and tension. What is left is pure comfort. Maintain the body still but flexible. Drop your shoulders. Eyes open, no blurry vision. Bring yourself back. Breathe in, your heart is filled with joy and comfort. You wish to radiate that gratitude, comfort to your friends and family, strangers, foes, enemies, and all sentient beings. And in the state of joy and comfort, you are concentrated. Breathe in, Ami. Breathe out, Tuofo. 按住呼吸，按住佛号。Back straight, elbows out, no blurry vision. Bring yourself back. Maintain awareness of your breathing. 按住呼吸，按住佛号。Eyes open, no blurry vision. Bring yourself back. Straight, elbows out. Drop your shoulders. Open, bring yourself back, blurry vision. Back straight, elbows out. Bring awareness of your breathing. 关注呼吸，祝佛号。Maintain awareness of your breathing. 注呼吸，祝佛号。You may release your meditations, rotate your wrists, rub your arms, your feet, your knees, your thighs. Continue to maintain awareness of your breathing. 继续按住呼吸，按住佛号。 Okay, all right, if you have regained your sensations, you may slowly rise. We bow to the Buddha 3 times to show respect. 好，慢慢起来。来，来，break out，来，低头。If we could please rise, 请起来。我们向佛上问讯。We bow to the Buddha 3 times to show respect. First bow, second bow, and third bow. Amida please be seated. 请坐。If you could please join your palms together, we recite Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to Fatum that the Tathagata's true meaning. Okay, this is where we are in the Amida Sutra, the nadir directions, and we've been learning about the meanings of the Buddhas. And the first one is the Lion Buddha, and it means, representing the strength and the confidence in propagating the truth. And to understand what a truth is, we should understand the basics, the 3 pillars of Buddhism: the Buddha Jews, the Dharma Jews, and the Sangha Jews. And we have been talking about the Dharma Jews. And where we left off last time was on the topic of reality. And we've been talking about the different elements of reality. Where we left off last time was liberation. And this time we will talk about Nirvana and what Nirvana is about, and what attracts us towards Nirvana. I extracted this excerpt from Shankara Sita, his book, What is the Dharma? The first question Buddhists get asked when they often meet non-Buddhists is likely, what is Nirvana? And when I share with them that I'm learning Buddhism, and I get asked the same questions from friends who were not too familiar with Buddhism. And that is a very typical question. What is Nirvana? And so in Shankara Sita, he said that when he was a Buddhist monk traveling in India, he also found himself being questioned by those nearby on what is Nirvana. They said, "You seem to be a Buddhist monk. Please tell me, what is Nirvana?" And indeed, it is a very appropriate question to ask, and that's because that's a main concentration purpose of Buddhism, is to be able to attain that stage, the state of Nirvana. So the question is, after all, addressing the whole point of being a Buddhist. So you see Buddhists engage in all different kinds of activities. Right? We have different schools. We have Pure Land schools, we have Zens, we have Tibetan, and they have their own different types of activities, but they all have the same overall purpose in view. And for example, in Japan, the monks wear their black robes, sitting in disciplined rows, meditating for hours on end. in the silence and tranquility of Zen monastery. And you may see ordinary Tibetans going in the early morning up in the steps of the temples, carrying the flowers and candles to make the offerings, kneeling, bowing, and chanting the verses of praising to the Buddha. The Dhamma, the Sangha, and then they praise the three Jews, and then they go about their daily business. And some petitioners have actually come in the morning here to bow to the Buddha, and then they leave and they go on their business. In Sri Lanka, the monks poring over palm leaf manuscripts, pages browned with age, and you see lay folks in Southeast Asia giving alms to the monks, and the Western Buddhists working together in right livelihood businesses. So you see there are many activities that Buddhists engage. And when you see unfolded this whole vast panorama of Buddhist activities, the question arises, why do we do this? Why do we make offerings to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and to the Sangha? And why do we engage in all sorts of Buddhist activities? So what is the reason for all of this? What is the moving spirit? What motivates us to be coming to the monastery, reading scriptures, bowing, praying? What's the motivation behind those activities? What are these people trying to do? What are they trying to achieve through their meditation, through their worshiping, through their study, through their almsgiving and their work, so on? What are they trying to achieve? So you ask this of any Buddhist people, you would probably receive a traditional answer. We're doing this for the sake of attaining enlightenment, nirvana, liberation. Right? That's typical of an answer. But then what happens? What then is nirvana? And how should it be understood? How should it be explained to friends who approach you on this question? What is nirvana? What are you trying to do? You're not going on travels, you're not going to parties, but you rather go to a monastery, you rather spend time praying, meditating, making offerings. So what are you trying to achieve, right? And so how should we explain to them? So if a person has a Christian background, he says in his book, one will try to envisage nirvana as a sort of internal life in heaven after death. Right? There may be understanding that I'm going to be liberated from the cycle of life and death, and I will never be born again. Because I've had too much of this world, and I don't want to be here anymore. So that could be one view. If one takes it outside the usual religious framework altogether, then one may even think of it as a state of complete annihilation or extinction, no more existence. You're completely out of existence. So of course, these are two wrong views. Eternal life, no more death, or no more life. Those are the two views that Buddhists should avoid. So here he says, but in fact, there is no excuse for these kinds of badly mistaken views. These are two extreme views that will lead one down onto the wrong road. Right? It is not really difficult to give a clear account of nirvana because the ancient scriptures are very clear as to what it is and to what it isn't. If one does have the job of presenting the topic nirvana, if we do have the opportunity to share with others, then how should we share with them? One could begin discussing the etymology, which is the meaning of the word of nirvana, because the meaning of the word means blowing out, or it can mean cooling down, no more of something, right? And one will no doubt go on to explain that according to the Pali text, at least, nirvana consists of extinctions of all craving, all hatred, and all ignorance of the true nature of things. Right? So at some point, it is customary to say that Nirvana is a state of incomparable bliss, to which the bliss of this world cannot be compared to. So they say there, the joy in Nirvana is much greater than what we can experience in the world. And if one wants to get a little bit more technical on the term, one may want to describe as two kinds of Nirvana. So the two kinds of Nirvanas, one is Klesha Nirvana, and the one is Skanda Nirvana. And Klesha Nirvana consists of extinction of all passions and defilement, whereas Skanda Nirvana consisting in extinction of all various processes of psychological existence. So what does this mean? So kleshas here are the mental states that cloud the mind and manifest in unwholesome actions. So klesha is your affliction, your 烦恼. So klesha is really your affliction that clouds the mind. Kleshas include a state of mind such as anxiety, fear, anger, jealousy, desire, depression, etc., all the negative mental states. Kleshas could be defined as afflictions, defilements, destructive emotions, disturbing emotions, negative emotions, mind poison, etc. So kleshas here is affliction. So a state of nirvana described in this way is a state where there is no affliction, no suffering. And the other one is the skanda nirvana. And according to Peter Harvey, he said that realizing the real nature of skandhas, which is the wu-yin, right, the five heaps, the five aggregates, both in terms of impermanence and non-self, is necessary for nirvana. So one is ending all affliction. The other one is realizing the truth, the true nature, understanding that the skandhas, the wu-yin, the five aggregates, are empty, they are impermanent, and they are non-self. So according to Peter Harvey, in his book, that's how he explains skandhas nirvana. So two ways to look at nirvana. If we want to get technical, we can explain nirvana in that way. One may then go on to the different interpretations of nirvana in the various different schools of Buddhism. Each school has its own view and therefore its own interpretation of what nirvana is. You have Theravada, you have Mayamaka and Yogacara, Tantra, Zen, and even Pure Buddhism. So it's always necessary to emphasize that nirvana is neither eternal life nor annihilations or extinctions in the materialistic sense. The Buddhist point of view of nirvana is neither an eternal life where you live forever or an extinction where you no longer have any kind of life. So those are the two extreme views that one should avoid when trying to explain what nirvana is. So one really Buddhism is the middle path between these two extreme views. So this is how nirvana is traditionally delineated or differentiated. Okay, so nirvana is conventionally defined as the goal of Buddhism, and it is in the respect of this particular way of positioning the concept that my approach is the author's approach in this chapter may appear to people. And so we should avoid the two extremes, right? Life being that nirvana is eternal life, and the other is extinction of life. So what is this? How is this defined according to the Princeton's dictionary? So nirvana here again, klesha is afflictions, and here says that in one famous description of nirvana, the Buddha explained. Hopefully, you can squeeze it a little bit more. There is that plane, right? That plane, ayatana. Ayatana here means it's a place, a place of some sort of plane. May not be a physical, but it's a plane of existence of some sort where there is neither earth, water, fire, nor air, right? Maha, Bhuta is the four elements, right? So earth, water, fire, and air. Those are the four elements. neither the sphere of infinite space, akasana for short, nor the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, never samna. So akasana means sphere of nothing. So this belongs to formless heaven, state of being. Then Nirvana is the fourth and the highest of the four levels of the formless realm. Okay, so neither the sensuous realm, neither the form realm, and it does not exist in the formless realm. That's what it means. Neither the sun nor the moon. Here, O monks, I say that there is no coming or going, no staying, no passing away, no arising. It is not something fixed. It moves not on. It is not based on anything. This is indeed the end of suffering. Even though this is a thoroughly negative description of nirvana, it is important to note that the passage opens with this certitude that there is that plane. So we can't say that it doesn't exist, but we can't say that it exists physically in any, because we cannot find it in the realm of desire, 欲界. We cannot find it in the realm of form, 色界, and we cannot find it in the realm of formlessness, 无色界. So, but it does not mean it doesn't exist. That's what it means, right? So the Buddha described the human existence as qualified by various forms of suffering, sought a state that would transcend such suffering, and determined that in order to put an end to suffering, one must destroy its causes. So unwholesome, meaning akusala is 无善, 不善的 actions, karma, actions here. So we have to end our unskillful deeds, unwholesome deeds, or the 恶业, 不善业, and the negative afflictions, 烦恼, right? Pleasure, 烦恼. But we have to end, that means we have to live an ethical life, and we have to end our afflictions in order to be able to reach that, the state of nirvana. If these causes, so these are the causes that prevent one from reaching nirvana. If we have unwholesome deeds, we have 恶业, we have affliction, we have 烦恼, then we can never get to that state of nirvana. If these causes could be destroyed, they would no longer have any effects, resulting in the cessations, meaning stop, of suffering. So no more suffering. Therefore, you achieve nirvana. Nirvana, therefore, was not regarded as a place, a physical place or a state of existence. Meaning that it is not a mental state that you could try to keep forever, but it's not a place that you could go into. Since by definition that would mean that it was part of samsara and thus subject to impermanence. And if there is any kind of existence that you could identify, then that is conditional, and it belongs to samsara, 轮回, 娑婆, 轮回, and therefore it's subject to impermanence and suffering. So nirvana here is instead an absence, and is often described in rigidly apothetic terms, meaning that often the term nirvana is described in a negative way. It's not this, it's not that, and it is because the Buddha did not want us to become attached to the language, the words. To say, if the Buddha was to say, well, if you achieve nirvana and nirvana is like this and it's like that, then if we were to achieve something like that, we say, oh, I have already achieved nirvana, but in fact, I have not, because I still have this self that's controlling me, the 我执还在, right? So if the Buddhas were to say, it's like this, and the brightness like this, and the feeling, the joy is like this, then whenever we cause rise to similar feeling, we think, oh, well, the Buddha has described such and such experience. I have similar experience, so I must have already achieved nirvana. I must be already a Buddha.
And so that's wrong. So therefore, the Buddha was very clever in saying, it's not this, nor it's not that. The Buddha was not trying to avoid explaining it, but to avoid setting traps for people later on to study Buddhism to fall into. Okusala is unskillful, bushan, and klesha is affliction, 烦恼, right? So, in other words, nirvana is you can conveniently call a state of being that is very positive. And this positivity includes morality, skillfulness, meditation, wisdom. So nirvana is not one thing that you could describe, but it consists of multiple things. You cannot say that nirvana is about observing precepts, 持戒. You cannot just say nirvana is about wisdom, because without precepts, without meditation, it's very difficult to have wisdom, ultimate wisdom. So you cannot say one single thing is nirvana. So nirvana is not one of these things, but it's nor none of these things. All right. So let's take a quick look. Here's an example of what that means. In the sutra called Relay Chariots, Gata Venita Sutra, right? And Gata Venita Sutra, which is an example that in this sutra is about one person getting from one place to the other through multiple chariots or carts, multiple carts. Where you can. So in this case, though, this was a record of Sariputra's conversations with Venerable Puna. So Venerable Sariputra, who was the foremost in wisdom, a disciple in foremost wisdom, Silifu is Sariputra, emerged from his seclusion meditation in the evening and went to see Venerable Puna. After exchanging friendly greetings and courtesies, he said to Venerable Puna, "My friend, is the holy life lived under the Blessed One?" So he was asking, what's the point of your practice essentially, right? And is it something that's holy, under living under the Blessed One, which is the Buddha, refers to. But he said, "Yes, friend." And then Sariputra says, for the sake of purity in terms of virtue. So what is it? In other words, is the holy life lived under the Blessed One for the sake of purity? He said, no, it's not for the sake of purity. Then Sariputra asked, is it for the sake of purity in terms of the mind concentration? He said, no. So the first question was it in terms of virtue? You're living a holy life, is it a pure life? Is it for the sake of virtue? Or is it for the sake of concentration of the mind? He said, no. And he said, is it in terms of view? He said, no. He also replied, no. And is it in terms of overcoming complexity, confusions, where a state of clarity? He said, no. And Sariputra continues to ask, is it in terms of knowledge and vision of what is and is not, the path? He said, no, that's not it either. And Sariputra continues to probe, is it in terms of knowledge and visions of the way? He said, no. And also he replies, no, my friend. And is it in terms of knowledge and vision? He said, no, also. So then Sariputra says, when asked if the holy life is lived under the Blessed One for the sake of purity in terms of virtue, you say no, and continue to ask you, is it in terms of mind, view, overcoming perplexity? You said no. So for the sake of what, then, my friend, is the holy life lived under the Blessed One? So then what is it? If it's none of these, then what is it? So Venerable Puna explains, the holy life is lived under the Blessed One, my friend, for the sake of total unbinding through the lack of clinging. So it's not just for one thing, but it's for unbinding, to achieve that freedom. These are all the things that you have to do to get to that state of being, so that you can become non-attached. But it's purely in terms of virtue, total and unbinding through lack of clinging. He said no. So in other words, you practice all this. Is it your goal is to achieve liberation? He said no. Even though he says, yes, all these things will lead to liberation, but there is no attachment to liberation, right? We don't become attached to nirvana, but we know that it will lead to nirvana, but we don't become attached to that concept of nirvana. So he said no. Then it's purely in terms of mind view, overcoming perplexity, knowledge, and so forth. Total unbinding through the lack of clinging, attachment. He said no. Then it's total unbinding through lack of clinging, something apart from these things. So in other words, so what you're achieving, is that none of these things? Or is it all these things? He said no. So when asked if purity in terms of virtues, mind view, and so forth, you said no. So is it something that's part of this or is not of this? You said no. You also say no. So how should I understand this? How should it be explained? How should it be understood, this practice, essentially? Venerable Puna explains, if the Blessed One had described purity in terms of virtue as total unbinding through lack of clinging, my friend, then he would have defined something still accompanied by clinging as total unbinding through the lack of clinging. So in other words, if the Buddha would say, yes, you practice Buddhism to achieve nirvana, and this is how nirvana is, then that is still attachment. Even if you describe it, say that you're going to achieve liberation, but there is no liberation because you still have that attachment to the idea of liberation. So therefore, it's not correct. But if total unbinding through lack of clinging, attachment, or 执着, right, were apart from these qualities, then a run-of-the-mill person would be totally unbound, in as much as a run-of-the-mill person is apart from these qualities. So run-of-the-mill person is somebody who runs after, essentially chases after his or her feelings. If there's something interesting, he chases after it. If something that's causing affliction, then he runs away from it. So that's run-of-the-mill, where there is just 反复, right? It's a person who is mundane, who does not have self-control. And so he said that, well, if the total binding through the lack of clinging, meaning that, oh, I don't have to do anything, I become detached. There's nothing, I don't want to be attached to anything, I'm not going to do anything. Then there is no difference of that person being a mundane person, just a 凡夫. Just a mundane person, not a sage, not a truly liberated person. So in other words, we study Buddhism to be liberated, to achieve nirvana. But if there is attachment to that nirvana, then there is no nirvana. But if a person who is not dedicated to that path, meaning there is some attachment for goodness, right? Just like Mr. Chen Huizang last time said, 所以要放下, 放下. But then to let go, what are you letting go? You cannot let go of all the positive things, all the good things. You let go of the negative things. But even when you let go of, but eventually you have to rise above that and let go of both, because in other words, because we have not achieved a state of liberation, we are not 圣人, we are not sages. We cannot let go of the good things, the good deeds, right? Meditation practice, we have to keep a schedule. We have to maintain our disciplines. You cannot say, I want to be liberated, therefore I'm going to let go of everything. And that is wrong, because we have not achieved to a point to let go of. And so therefore, you cannot say that, it depends on where you are. You cannot say, I can let go. The state of liberation is to let go, therefore I don't need to maintain my discipline. And that is wrong also, right? And so that's what Venerable Puna is trying to explain. Is that clear? Okay. So my friend, he said, I will give you an analogy to help explain this. He said that to help us understand, a real an example would help to explain the meaning of this. So suppose that the wild king Pasendanadi was staying at Savatthi, which is a city back in an ancient city in India, had some urgent business were to arise at Sikata, which is another city, Sikata, right? So between Sikata and Savatthi, there's a distance that the king would have to travel. And there were 7 relay chariots made ready for him. They're prepared along the way. So in case the horse gets tired, right, then he can jump to another horse because it's urgent. He needs to get there immediately. It's urgent business. So coming out of the door of the inner palace of Savatthi, the originating place of that city, he would get into the first relay chariot. By means of the first relay chariot, he would reach the second relay chariot. So it's like a horse, right? The cart. By means of the second chariot, he would reach the third. So he's starting out in his inner palace with the first chariot, and then after a certain distance, he gets out of that first chariot and goes on to the second chariot and continues to travel for a certain amount of distance, and he gets out of the second chariot and jump onto the third chariot and so forth. And then he would reach the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and by means of the sixth, he would reach the seventh relay chariot. By means of the seventh relay chariot, he would finally arrive at the door of the inner palace of Sikata, so the destination. As he's arrived there, his friends and companions, relatives, and kin would ask him, "Great king, did you come from Savatthi to the door of the inner palace of Sikati by means of this chariot?" Meaning the seventh chariot. In answering, in what way, my friends, would King Pasadana Sakola answer them correctly? So Puna was asking Sariputra, Silifu, how should the king answer in such a way that is proper? He said, answering in this way, my friend, he said, would answer them correctly. So Venerable Puna says, just now as I was staying at Savatthi, a city, some urgent business arose at Sikata. And between Savatthi and Sikata, 7 relay chariots were made ready for me. Coming out the door of the inner palace in Savatthi, I got in the first relay chariot. By the means of the first relay chariot, I reached the second relay chariot, and then the third chariot, the fourth, fifth, sixth, and by means of the sixth, I reached the 7th relay chariot. And by means of the 7th relay chariot, I finally arrived at the door of the inner palace of Sikata, his final destination. So Venerable Puna says, answering in this way, he would answer them correctly. So in the same way, my friend, purity in terms of virtue is simply for the sake of purity in terms of mind. So one leads to the other. Right? When we live virtuously, when we live harmoniously, we do good deeds, or the 善业. When we do our good deeds, our mind is pure. It leads to the purity of the mind, right? And and in terms of mind is simply for the sake of purity in terms of view. So when the mind is concentrated, it can see things clearly. And then it can overcome perplexity or confusion. When you see things clearly, you naturally overcome perplexity, confusion. And in terms of knowledge and visions of what is and what is not, when you see things clearly and there's no confusion, you will be able to see what is wrong, what is right, what is good, what is bad. You see it, you can differentiate very clearly. And that leads to in terms of knowledge and vision of the way. So then you know how to take your steps to avoid pitfalls, because you know exactly what's ahead of you, what's wrong, what's right, and so forth. You move forward. In other words, you just don't see it and then don't do anything. You still have to move forward, but you can move forward very safely because there there may be traps, pitfalls, but you can avoid them because you see where they are, right? And in terms of knowledge and vision, right? And purity in terms of knowledge and vision is simply for the sake of total unbinding through the lack of clinging. So at the end is liberation, no attachment. But it takes a lot of work, efforts to get to that stage. It's not that I want to reach Nirvana, and Nirvana is about non-attachment, no binding. Therefore, I just let go of everything. You were trying to take a shortcut, and that is not correct, because there's a lot of work that leads to that state. So it is for the sake of total unbinding through lack of clinging, 执着, attachment, that the holy life is lived under the blessed one. Right? So Sarupatra says to okay. Make sure I'm not going too fast. Sarupatra, Silifu, said to Venerable Puna, "What is your name, my friend, and how do your companions in the holy life know you?" So they have 法名, right? They have their own names that they are known for. And he said, "My name is Puna. Friends and my companions in the holy life know me as Matani Buddha." And okay, and he said, "How amazing, my friend! How astounding that Venerable Puna has answered point by point with profound discernment in the manner of a learned disciple who has rightly understood the teacher's message." So Sarupatra was very happy of Venerable Puna's explanations, very thorough, with an example, analogy that is very helpful in understanding that, right? So the example is you want to go from one destination to the other. We are the state of fanfu, right? A state of binding, state of suffering. But we want to get to a destination of no suffering. We cannot just let go and expect to be there, or to hold on into what we have and expect to be there. You can't. If you're attached to where you are, you can never get to Nirvana. But if you don't put in the effort to get to Nirvana, then you'll never get to Nirvana. So in other words, the message here is saying we have to take step by step of traditionally in order to get there. We have to put in the efforts to meditate, to observe the precepts, 持戒, and all the good deeds, right? 布施, givings, all the good deeds to get there. We should not say that Nirvana is about 放下, right? 随缘, to non-attachment. Therefore, I don't need to do anything, and that's not correct. Okay. And then so Venerable Puna asked Venerable Sarupatra, "What is your name, friends, and how do your companions in holy life know you?" So these are two strangers. They've been talking, but then they didn't know one another. So he said, "My name is Apatissa. Friends and companions in holy life know me as Sarupatra, Silifu." Right? Then Venerable Punya was so shocked to say, "What? I've been talking with the disciple who is like the teacher himself without knowing that it is Venerable Sarupatra. So had I known it was Venerable Sarupatra, I wouldn't have answered at such length." So he was giving a discourse to a disciple who is well respected and foremost in wisdom. Okay, so he was a little bit. So let's explain this a little more to help us understand thoroughly, to avoid any kind of confusion, hopefully. So we just explained that to get to one's destination, one cannot just do not do anything and expect to be there, or become attached to a current state of being and expect to be there, right? So Buddhism is not just about precept, 持戒, or meditations or wisdom. but it's all three. And one can't just observe precepts alone and become a Buddha. Just like Mr. Chen Huizhang said that you can't just show Baguan Zhaijie the 8 precept and expect to be in the Western Pure Land, because there's no direct correlation. There needs to be intermediate steps. Like, what's the purpose of your observing the precepts? And so, observing the precept, you can't just observe the precept and expect to become a Buddha. Just like no killing, eating grass, cows eating grass, right? They spend a whole life eating grass, vegetarian diet. We are not cannot be compared to them because they are much better. But yet, doesn't mean that by eating grass that you can achieve Buddhahood. That's what it means here. And one can't just meditate one's way to Buddhahood. You can't just sit in meditation all your life and expect to become a Buddha. People who practice meditation, they can achieve the realm of formlessness, right? 色界, 无色界, but it doesn't mean that they can enter very deep meditation, but they cannot achieve liberation, enlightenment. And it takes enlightenment and wisdom to achieve Buddhahood. But however, we cannot develop wisdom without the foundation of ethics, morality, and support of meditation. So we need all three, right? When you're trying to get to a destination, you're relying on 7 chariots. So the question is, which chariot gets you to the final destination? You cannot say it's chariot number 1, 2, 3, or 7. You have to say them all. You cannot say that it was chariot number 1, the cart number 1, that took me to my destination. Or when you arrive at the destination with chariot number 7, cart number 7, you cannot say it was cart number 7 that took me to a destination. So ethics, living an ethical life, brings joy because you have no worries. You have done nothing wrong. And that leads to meditative mind. You can concentrate better. And that leads to wisdom. So let's take a quick look, side note here, of what is the correlation between how the Buddha explains between ethics, joy, and meditation. So this way, hopefully to make it clear. So in this sutra here, Lohika Sutra, the Buddha explained about living an ethical life leads to happiness by abandoning the hindrances, 障碍, these obstructions. He said that by living an ethical life is really to eliminate covetousness, meaning 贪欲, right, or desire. So, and that leads to joy, 离欲, right? And so he said that the Buddha says that by abandoning selfish craving, one dwells in awareness of devoid of covetousness, meaning abandoning it, but then dwells in that, meaning that you cannot say, I abandon it, but you don't live that way. You have to live that way. And he cleanses his mind of selfish craving. And so, no selfish craving, abandoning it, and abandoning ill will and anger, living a life of no ill will and anger, having that awareness, and therefore the mind the mind follows that path, and therefore the next thing is to abandon sloth and drowsiness, meaning in clarity of the mind and you lack of energy, and abandoning restlessness and anxiety, and he dwells in undisturbed and his mind inwardly still, and abandoning uncertainty. This is doubt, 怀疑, no perplexity with regard to skillful mental qualities, meaning that there is no doubt of doing good things. Doing good. Sometimes we have doubt when we face a situation whether to donate or not, because we have self-centeredness. We don't want to give. We fear of committing. Let's say if I were to come to 共修 meditation every week, then I don't have a life to enjoy. So that's fear of losing out. So, but if we see clearly no perplexity, this is like one is in clarity. Then you have no perplexity. Then it's very easy to see what's wrong, what's right, and to be able to commit to skillful mental qualities. So he said, the Buddha says, give an example. Well, how does it lead to joy, and what kind of joy? How is that state of being like? The Buddha says, suppose a man owes debt, and he finally repays his old debts, and there is extra money left over for his family. So the feeling that I have no more debt, I don't have any collectors calling me every day asking for debt, that experience would lead to joy and happiness. Or a man who has fallen sick, right? He's sick, he does not enjoy his meal, and he has no physical strength. And eventually, when he recovers from that sickness, that's joy, right? When we have a toothache and we try to eat our favorite meal, it hurts because of toothaches. But then one day, suddenly we start eating, and then there's no more pain. What a joy from that experience, that there's no more toothache, no more headache. And so that the kind of joy that when has gone above self-craving, it leads to joy naturally. So because of this, he would experience joy and happiness. Or a person who is in prison, but when he's released, then there is joy in that too. When you're in prison is very restricted. You cannot do anything. You don't know when you're going to be released. But if you're finally released, you can now freely roam around, do what you like, meet your family, and therefore there's joy in that. And always, our man that is a slave or subject to others, and able to go anywhere he likes, but eventually he's released from that slavery, free and able to go wherever he likes. That freedom can bring joy and happiness. And so for a man traveling from one place to another, carrying a lot of money and goods, and going through a desolate country, like a desert, where you don't know, you lost your way, you don't know where you're going to be, and or maybe it's a risk, danger of being killed, robbed, or bitten by snake, poisonous snake. But once he emerges from that desolate country, safe and sound, and with no loss of property, because of that he would experience joy and happiness. And so the Buddha says that when we abandon the selfish craving, it is like overcoming these hindrances, this 障碍. And the monk regards it as death, sickness, prison, slavery, being lost. So when we have selfish craving, it is like owning a big debt or being sick, because we're constrained. There's fear, because the more that we have, when we have selfish craving and we achieve our pursuit, there is fear of losing. And so even though we have a lot of money, but there is still fear of losing. So that fear does not bring happiness and joy. Okay. So because of that his body, he's glad, he becomes enraptured, and in being enraptured, his body grows tranquil, and he is sensitive to pleasure, joy, and his mind becomes concentrated. So I know. Let me summarize here. So when we abandon selfish craving, we become glad that we don't have that debt. It's like, because we're no longer enslaved to our own craving, and that leads to rapture. So it's just like 喜乐, right? Rapture, the body tranquil. Tranquility here is 舍, 慈悲喜舍 的舍, where you let go of even the joy that you're trying to acquire. You let go of it to rise above that, and that leads to pleasure, joy, and then concentration. And that is the foundation for jhana. And I'll just go through the first jhana text to show you how living an ethical life leads to meditation. Is a person who is very joyful because he has or she has done nothing wrong. knowing that you have done nothing wrong, it's a very powerful feeling. And that powerful feeling allows you to sit at ease, sit in ease and freedom from all afflictions, right? So in the first jhana, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful mental qualities. So this is the foundation of the first jhana, is 离欲理不善法. Maybe you can. Hopefully you can see that. So this is the foundation of first jhana, is to this is the first criteria for the first jhana, 2 tan, is to overcome selfish craving and to not commit to not commit to unskillful deeds. And so when a person who is withdrawn from sensuality and withdrawn from unskillful mental state, he enters and remains in the first jhana. Or as there's rapture, there's pleasure, born from that withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. You just don't sit there, but you expand your consciousness. You evolved by like 思维, you think about it, you ponder about it, you analyze it. And the Buddha gave an example. How is this like? The Buddha gave an example. It is like a skilled bathman or apprentice would pour bath powder into a brass basin and knead it together. So you take powder, soap powder, and you put some water in it to make it a ball. You tighten it, or you make it into a ball because they bind together. And sprinkling water, so the more you add soap powder, you add a little bit more and more water until it's enough, absorbs enough moisture, water to hold it together. So this is in his ball of bath powder, saturated, moisture laden, permeated within and without. So inside and outside all has enough moisture, enough water to keep it all together and would not drip. So that's the state of first jhana. So what does that mean? We're talking about meditation practice, and the Buddha gave an example of this soap powder ball. What does that mean? So this is what it means here. It means that when we sit meditate, in order to achieve the first level of meditation, all of our energies need to be concentrated. We have different personalities popping in and out throughout the day. Right? Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're very dedicated, and sometimes we're not too motivated. So we have different personalities in us popping in and out. And we're not united. Sometimes we can make our mind. Right? When we feel dedicated, we spend hours on end reading sutras, meditating, baitan, and all that, right? Prostration. But when we feel lazy, unmotivated, we don't want to do those things. So we are not any of those. We are no one self. We consist of multiple selves, and that will not lead to the first state of jhana, sutan. So in order to get to the first state of jhana, all of our mental, physical, and emotional energies need to line up, become one. We feel happy. We feel motivated. Sometimes we're motivated, but we're not happy. So dedicated, but not happy. We want to, by time, we want to repent. We want to do all these activities, but we don't want to. We feel lazy. So that is a split in personality, and that will lead to conflict. So one does not. We have different selves pulling us in different directions. We are dedicated. We want to go into these directions, but then we don't have the physical energy. We don't have the mental joy towards it. We think it's very laborious. It's a labor, right? We have to put in effort. It's so hard work, so much hard work. So therefore, we have that conflict in our path. We have one self pulling us in the direction, then another personality pulling us in different direction. Therefore, we are divided. We are not concentrated like that soap ball, right? But at the beginning, it's all scattered. Soap is all over the place. And then we put it all together with a little bit of moisture, a little water to pack it up into a ball. That's when we're concentrating ourselves. So when a person has no different conflicting selves pulling him in different directions, then he's happy because he's concentrated. And he's able to maintain his focus and concentration because he's joyful. An example that Shankaracita gave in his book was like a bee buzzing around, zzz, trying to find nectar on a flower. And it keeps buzzing, zzz, and then when it finds the right flower, it lands and zzz, stop. All the buzzing stops because he's concentrated on that nectar. Just like when we are concentrated, we're feeling very peaceful. We want to sit there forever because we have no distractions, we have no afflictions, and we sit down forever. But if you had worries like your children, it's already 11:30 at night, where is he? Why hasn't he come back yet? It is very difficult to concentrate at that point, right? Because we are all over the place. Even though it is our normal time to, let's say, to meditate, but if we have things that come up and we have worries, we cannot. Even though we've been doing it for years, but if things come up and it distracts us, then our mind cannot concentrate because we have our heart's different directions, being pulled direction mentally, psychologically, emotionally, being pulled in different directions. Like the powder is all scattered. And so when you put it together, you're concentrating it. And so the analogy that the Buddha gave is that our personalities will have to come together as one. We have to come together as one. We have to decide for ourselves that I want to go this way. Intellectually, I see it. I understand the principle. Emotionally, I am motivated. Like 自信信乐, right? We're motivated. We're happy to be here. We're happy to go there. We're happy to practice. I want to practice, and I'm happy to practice. So that is concentration. That is the first jhana. So the conflict normally that people encounter is between, on one hand, you have what you should do, like meeting your responsibility, your obligations. The other one is to do what you like to do. You want to go and play, to go shopping. The other one is house chores, taking care of the family. The other one is to go play, right? Of course, the first thing we should do is to meet our commitment, responsibilities at home, at work, and so forth. Whoever that we have a responsibility of, we should try and meet those responsibilities. But when the two intersect, meaning the two cross, what we should do and what we want to do, they come together, they become one. That is success, right? And because what we should do is what we want to do, what we like to do. Then that is a person who is concentrated, who is one self, not multiple selves. At the beginning, we have multiple selves. Oh, I need to do this. My job is my responsibility. But it's just too much work. I'd rather go and play. So we have two personalities conflicting, pulling in different directions. One wants to go this way. The other one wants to go the other way. Right? In your mind, you say, yes, I need to meet my responsibility. I need to really put in practice. But then I also want to play. So there will be a conflict. And as long as that conflict exists, we cannot get to the first state of jhana, according to the scripture. So unskillfulness, 不善业, right, will lead to internal conflicts. When we have different personalities popping in and out, there will be a conflict in us. And that will lead to dissatisfaction. It will lead to suffering. Because we can't decide what we want to do, and there will be suffering. But skillfulness leads to calm and joy. And when we push that towards the path of concentration, cultivation, then it leads to concentration. And with concentration, it leads to jhana. So the first level of jhana, chutan, is not really chan. It's not truly chan because that's just the foundation. The first state of jhana, it's just a foundation, a preparation to concentrate the mind. Is when you are now united. Your thinking, your feelings, your emotions, all that are now one. That's chutan. That is first jhana. Okay, so skillfulness leads to calm and joy, and that leads to concentration. So that's what, when we observe the precepts, 持戒, it leads to calm and joy, and then we push that, it leads to concentration, because when we know that we have done nothing wrong, it builds naturally, it creates joy, and that joy allows us to concentrate. If we have done something wrong, we will be right? We will have regrets. Those regrets will disturb us mentally, and therefore we will not be able to maintain that joy. Therefore, we cannot maintain our concentration because we have 烦恼, afflictions. Therefore, we can never get to the state of jhana because we don't know what we want. So here is like we need to know what we want, and we need to know who we are. Do we really want to spend time practicing it, or do we want to go play? What do we want? We have to ask ourselves that. What do we want in life? How much time and energy do you want to spend studying Buddhism? Is that more important to you, or you want to go make money and the results? And sometimes we don't know what we want. It's when we want it all, because we don't know what we want. We have not put down our efforts to make a decision, make that commitment. So that's a relationship between skillfulness and calm and joy meditation. Okay, so let's go back to our explanation here, where we have the threefold studies, 三学, right? Precepts, meditation, and wisdom. 戒定慧. And it's all not. It's neither any one nor none of them. But what we want to be liberated, we have to have wisdom, insight, and enlightenment. But that's the destination that we cannot go to directly. We need to have the intermediate steps. Okay? So Mahayana describes Buddha as one who has achieved perfect merits and wisdom. So Lang Zhu Zun, right? And there's a Buddhist dictionary that describes Vipadhatama as two-footed honor one, Lang Zhu Zun. And it's a Buddha who is most honor one among sentient beings standing on 2 feet. In other words, in God and man, he rises above God and man. Moreover, the 2 feet of the Buddha are compared to meditation and moral conduct, merit and wisdom, knowledge in the relative and absolute truth, knowledge and action, or vow and action. A Buddha has perfected both. But we also know that Zhu Zun, two-footed honor one, is really like a completion, ultimate completion of perfections in merit and wisdom. You can simply say that. So in other words, we can't get to liberation and enlightenment without merit, without wisdom. We need to have both. And that's why it's important that we 持戒, we observe the precepts in order to help us get there. Don't say that it's about liberation, even though I just mentioned earlier that you cannot observe your precepts all your life and expect to become a Buddha, but it doesn't mean that we should not observe the precepts, because by committing unskillful deeds, we will have internal conflict, as we just explained, right? So, however, one has to eventually let go of precepts, spiritual speaking, meaning in your heart, in your mind, you cannot be attached. But outside on appearance, when you interact with people, we need to observe the precepts. We need to respect others. Even though the Buddha says all sentient beings are equal. But if we meet our elderly, like Huizang, Mr. Chen, we have to show our respect. Even though his Buddha nature and our Buddha nature are the same, but we cannot say, oh, because we are the same, when he comes in, I don't need to acknowledge him. That's disrespectful, and that will lead to unskillfulness, right? But inside we understand that we are equal. But on outside we have to show where we are, what we have achieved, because our merits, our wisdom cannot be compared to Huizang, Mr. Chen, even though our Buddha nature are the same, but we're not the same. So in order to achieve meditation, we have to let go of it. We cannot become attached and be bothered by what we have done. Let's say you made a mistake and you occupy yourself with mistakes, then that's not good, because that will not lead you to meditation, lead you to joy and concentration. And in order to achieve meditation, we'll have to let go of, be bothered of keeping the precepts, spiritually speaking, and to let go of calming meditation to obtain wisdom. So this is 止观, right? Calming meditation, samatha is 止, and vipassana is 观, so which is wisdom. So we have to go from one to the other. You cannot have a clear view of reality without your mind being calm and concentrated. So for example, if one is always worried about violating precepts, then one can never be at ease, right? And to be meditative, one has to let go of worries and all afflictions, all the fannao. But if one violates precepts and commits unskillful deeds, then one's mind will be disturbed by with afflictions from karmic consequences. Being ethical, knowing that one has done nothing wrong, is a very powerful agent for meditative calmness. Right? When the mind is calm, one can see things very clearly, knowing what's wrong, what's right, what's skillful, what's unskillful, what's good, what's bad. One knows very clearly. And then one will automatically and naturally do the right things at the right time. When you see things very clearly, and in order to maintain the clarity of the mind and the peacefulness in the mind, you are going to naturally do the right things. And that means upholding precepts, 持戒, right? And that means cultivate merit cultivation, 修福, right? Automatically, and that leads to meditative mind. The meditative mind deepens, and that will lead to wisdom. And so that circle continues. When you have more wisdom, you see things even more clearly, and you're going to do even more things right. And that will lead to more calm, and that will lead to more concentration, and that leads to more wisdom. So the cycle continues. So traditionally, of course, it's safer of a route to follow the threefold study, 三学, 戒定慧, right? Precepts, meditation, wisdom, and avoid shortcuts for fast results. Okay. All right. So essentially, that's nirvana. Nirvana is a state of non-attachment, but it's not attachment to non-attachment. Okay. So where do we go from here? What does this mean, anyways? And now that we understand what nirvana is, or at least a state of it, where do we go from here? How do we use it? So in other words, we have to ask ourselves what we want and who we are, and that's what we should take this a little bit further and try to explain where we go from here. So in his book, Sangarsita, What is the Dharma? This is a chapter on the psychology of goal setting. And here, as I say here, it helps to know who we are and what we want. Because in our practice, we're committing a lot of time. And if we don't know for sure why we spend so much time, every weekend we come here spending a whole day, day in, day out for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, or we want to commit for the rest of our lives, coming here, practicing. What are we going to get out of it? We have to be clear, otherwise it will not have that sense of commitment, because what we do will not have a good sense of clarity for directions. So all kinds of groups of people in the world, each of these groups has its goal, be it power or wealth or some other satisfaction for their own good or the good of others. So we have a goal, right? We come here, we have a goal of coming here. We're committing our time, so there is a goal, a purpose of why we're here. The Buddhists likewise have their own particular goal that they call Nirvana. Or for our Pure Land Buddhism, our intermediate goal, the next goal for us is 往生极乐世界, right? Migration to the Western Pure Land. So that is our next goal. So let us look at what is meant by the idea of a goal to be attained or realized. So in other words, you have a goal, but how are you going to attain it? How are you going to realize it? Because many people every year, they make New Year's resolution. I'm going to lose weight, whatnot. And then 5 days later, they've lost the goal. They start eating more than they should. And so, in other words, we have a goal, very good idea, but what's more important is how to maintain it and keep it, not only for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but the rest of our lives. If we want to have success, what's important for 往生极乐世界 migration to Western Pure Land is the last moment. At the last moment, you have to decide where you're going to go. You have to decide, are you willing to go to the Western Pure Land or not? We have to make that decision. You can make a decision now, you're very clear, but your time is not yet. That's not important. It's good, you're heading in the right direction, but what's more important is at the end, where you really have to make a decision. That is more important than right now, right? So how are we going to maintain that journey for the rest of our lives so that when we get to that destination, we know exactly what decision to make? And that's why I think it's important that we spend a few minutes to talk about this, okay? I think Shankarisita has very good ideas of human psychology. And once we understand about human psychology, we understand more about ourselves, and we can overcome our weaknesses and obstructions. So it should be clear at once where this procedure is going to lead us. So we have to be clear in what is it that we want in terms of goal setting. The fact is that whenever terms get to be used rather loosely, meaning that you can use it very loosely without any kind of definitive bounds, without any lucid or clear consideration, beginnings of serious misunderstanding. That's the beginning of a serious misunderstanding. In other words, if we don't understand things very clearly, it could lead to misunderstanding, because you can interpret in any way, and sometimes it conflicts in the interpretations. This is particularly the case when we transfer terms and expressions derived from mundane experience like go, or spiritual or transcendental experience of nirvana. In other words, we have to understand what nirvana is. In order to say, I want to achieve nirvana, or I want to go to Western Pure Land, we have to understand what that Western Pure Land is. Not 极乐世界. What is it that you want to commit to? Because psychologically, and also logically, you will never want to be at a place where you don't know anything about it. You will never want to live at a place that you don't know anything about it. The psychology doesn't allow you to do that. You may be forced to go there, but you're not going to be there. It's just spiritually, you're not there because you don't want to be there, or mentally. Right? So in other words, when we set goal, like nirvana, I want to achieve nirvana, I want to go to the Western Pure Land. What does that mean? That's what he's asking. He wants to make sure that we understand what our goal is. When we say we want to go to Western Pure Land or to achieve nirvana, what does that mean? Do we have a clear understanding of what that means? With this in mind, let us examine the idea of goal a bit more closely. So what is this goal here? And why do we have goal? Why do we even want to set a goal? Is that a goal is an objective. It is something you strive for. You want to attain it. You could, if you like, draw a distinction between striving to be and striving to have. To be and to have, right? But actually, the two come to the same thing. He said, having is a sort of vicarious being. So a goal is, in the end, something you want to be, right? A goal is essentially you want to be. You want to have, it's essentially the same as to be. So suppose, for instance, your goal is wealth. Let's say your goal is to be a wealthy person. You can say that your goal is to possess wealth, have a lot of money. Or your goal is to be wealthy, but obviously possessing, the having, is reducible to being, to the existing. Right? So you want to be wealthy, but also that you have that possessions of wealth. So being and having essentially is the same thing. So there is one really crucial, very important point here, and an obvious one. The precondition for goal setting is that it must represent something you aren't, you're not. So a goal is you're trying to be something to attain something that you don't have. So we want to go to Western Pure Land, our next goal, because we don't have that state of being. We don't have that environment. That's why we want to go there. So you don't want to have or to be what you already have. So if your goal is to lose 5 pounds, that means you are 5 pounds heavier, right? You can only want to be what you aren't, which suggests that you are dissatisfied with what you are. And this dissatisfaction is not a negative way. Sometimes we want to achieve higher. That means we are not satisfied. 自满, right? You feel satisfied. Then there's no goal. Then that's where you start to decline actually. But if you say, I'm lacking, I don't have the wisdom, I don't have the merits, and I would like to have an environment where I can cultivate merits and wisdom perfectly. And that's the goal, because we want to be to go beyond what we don't have. And because we're unsatisfied of being in the samsara, 轮回, right, for a long time, in this cycle of life and death for a long time, we are not happy with it, because lifetime after lifetime, we get nothing out of it. We are unhappy. We are dissatisfied. And that's a motivation to achieve something higher. So if your goal happens to be money and material possessions, then that means you are dissatisfied with being poor, right? If you want to be wealthy, it just means that you are satisfied being in being poor. If you want to, you make knowledge your goal, you want to be smart, then that means you want something to add to your understanding. You want to learn, right? So then you want to do this because you are dissatisfied with your present state of being, of ignorance. You want to have knowledge. You want to be smarter because you are unsatisfied with being ignorant. So a point I want to elaborate a little bit more here. Okay. So we have a goal and we want to get there, but there's always complications, obstructions along the way. It's not easy to achieve a goal. And the complication occurs when one does not want to put in the efforts to pursue one's goal, even though the effort sometimes is hard work, very arduous, right? We have to come here week after week. You have to sacrifice your vacation sometimes. But there's effort in it. That discipline will bring joy. And for example, right? So this is because one does not understand the law of conditionality. This is 缘起法. Conditionality is 缘起法. For example, one is dissatisfied with being poor, but one is not willing to practice giving. Right? He's not willing to put in efforts to give, to 布施, to donate. Because one does not understand the law of conditionality. Either one does not understand that the primary karmic conditions for being poor is greed, or that one is not courageous enough to overcome the egoistic attachment of fear of losing. Because one doesn't want to give because there's fear of giving money away, there's fear of losing. To understand conditionality is to appreciate that it is not only about giving, but it is also about cultivating loving kindness to eliminate the suffering of others and to cultivate compassion to help others achieve happiness. So it's not just about giving. There is compassion and loving kindness associated with it, so that when we have compassion to achieve happiness, and hope that they will feel empowered to overcome their own suffering, and that empowers us to overcome our own ego. When we have loving kindness, we're willing to do more because we can overcome our ego, 我执, right? And that leads to joy and tranquility, right? This is 四无量心, right? The four immeasurables, 慈悲喜舍, right? In order to have 喜, right? joy, you have to have 慈悲, you have to have loving kindness and compassion. And if you want to go above 喜 joy, then you have to 舍, let go of it. Right? That's what it means. So loving kindness and compassion are very powerful ways of overcoming egoistic attachment and fear. 我执, 烦恼, right? Joy and tranquility, 喜 and 舍, ensure egoism and fear don't surface. Because when we have joy is when we see others successful, we have joy. That means we can overcome jealousy. If we have jealousy, it inhibits joy from surfacing. And if we don't let go, then we can never overcome our egoistic attachment. 我执. So to understand who we are and what we want, we should understand the law of conditionality and provide the proper conditions and efforts for the situations. If we want to be wealthy, we have to practice 布施, donate, and charity. We cannot have greed. You can say, I want to be rich, therefore I'm going to hoard. I'm going to keep all my money so I can be rich, I can have more wealth. It doesn't work that way. Because if it's meant for you to lose that wealth, you're going to lose that wealth. Right? So one first studies Buddhism. One is very dedicated at the beginning. As one gets more dedicated, distraction and obstructions start to occur. Right? At the beginning, the first few years, we're very dedicated. Everything's very smoothly. But as we get deeply into it, we find out that we have a lot of obstructions. People is obstructing us, not allowing to study, with a lot of obstructions, either at work, at home, and so forth. So work and family become more demanding, right? They want more attention from us. What happens is then one is debating with oneself whether to drop Buddhist studies or to meet the demands of life and work. I'm too busy for Buddhism. I cannot come. I cannot study. I'm too busy at work, at home. And now we have a dilemma. And that's where failure starts to occur. Right? So this is not an uncommon duality that a Buddhist faces. This is 冲突, a conflict between our aspiration for Nirvana to be liberated, but then we're being pulled by work and home, right? Demands work and home. And it is duality, conflict, because one thinks that Buddhism is separate from life, forcing one to choose one over the other. When we have that thinking, we have that conflict, but it's self-created. We create a conflict and now we have to make a decision. We're forcing ourselves to make a decision because we see conflicts of Buddhism and life. But in reality, Buddhism is life, and life is Buddhism. We don't have to have that conflict. We don't have to force ourselves to make decisions that we don't need to make. So when one puts his or her efforts to raise a good family, that one does a super job at work, put 110% at work to complete assignment with ethics and morality, one is practicing Buddhism, right? So there's no conflict there. That means observing the precepts and also practicing the four immeasurables, 自无量心. When we see our co-workers succeed, we cause rise to happiness and we support that person to become successful. That is joy, 慈悲, and then it leads to joy, 喜. And then but if we say, it is me who has made that person successful and I'm so proud of myself, then that is limited. We have to let go of that to achieve true joy. When one gives generous tips to a waiter, you go to restaurants and you give a very generous tips to a waiter who has done an outstanding service. That is very generous. Like Mr. Chen, he said, 会长, he said, a lot of masters, a lot of people like this this place because this place is so generous. We're generous in terms of our respect and reverence for them, but also monetarily. They need help. We help even other places, other 道场, financially. Excuse me. So because of that generosity, that is 布施, right? When we go, and he wants the best service, meaning that if it costs a little bit more, it's okay because it's good for Tongxiu, it's good for those who come here, because we want those who come here to have the best service. He wants to offer the best to Tongxiu, all the people who come here. And that's what he's demanding, and I can completely understand it, and understand him and appreciate that, because of that we maintain a very high standard. We don't let ourselves lose, say, it's just a mistake, just forget about it, nobody will know. He said, no, you have to avoid mistakes. You have to maintain that high standard, because once we let go, everything will fall, everything else will fall. So bullshit, when we go and negotiate, we don't negotiate down to the penny when we buy something, right? That's bullshit. So when we create an atmosphere of morality and respect, we help to make society a better place for ourselves and better. That's the value of Buddhism. When we help other people, we help ourselves, we help society. That's the value of Buddhism, the selfless spirit. Buddhism is not duality, 冲突, conflict. Buddhism is how one incorporates the principles in one's daily life, and is mindful of one's objectives, liberation, helping others, without being attached to it, right? So the Nirvana, the goal setting is we need to understand who we are and what we want. So we have to understand the conditionality, 缘起法. Then say, this is what we want. We have to put in the efforts to get there, and we should not be shy of putting in hard work to achieve what we want. We may be tired, but we should be committed to our learning, right? So when we get into the tango, when we extend this into the spiritual life, and he said, I don't mean some elevated sphere of experience, far removed from everyday concerns, meaning it's not realistic, but it's something very close. So the complex of the problem here boils down to the most basic problem of all, unhappiness. So we want to go to Jila Sijie, we want to go to Nirvana because we're unhappy. But we should understand, what does that mean? Because otherwise, we will never be successful. For example, like a person with bad temper, right? It makes that person miserable, because that bad temper, the anger, makes that person miserable. Equally, say that that being miserable makes us bad temper. So let me get to I have a few more minutes. Let me get to this. So I know we're trying to get away from unhappiness to attain happiness. In other words, if we want to go to Jila Sijie, Western Pure Land, and because we are unhappy, then that means that we are trying to find something to fill that unhappiness. We don't understand the principle. We just want to get away from this place to go to another place. So that is not the goal of migration to the Western Pure Land. Because what's going to happen is we're going to get attached to whatever that we see that will make us happy. So when we feel unhappy, we set up a goal of happiness. And when we fail, and we will fail because we don't understand why we're setting up that goal. So I'm going over here. Give me 5 more minutes to explain this. So all our lives, through we are in search of happiness. Right? We search for happiness because we say that this life is miserable. We want to have happiness, and therefore I'm searching for happiness. So there's no one who's searching for misery, right? So searching for happiness because of that person being unhappy. Most people, if they are honest with themselves, they admit that life consists of fluctuating state, up and down, satisfaction, dissatisfactions, and sometimes small moments of happiness, but overall it's not very happy. So the possibility of being happy, a goal, can never be realized because happiness is by its nature fleeting, meaning you cannot obtain happiness. You cannot hold on to happiness and hope that it will go away. It won't go away. It's fleeting. It doesn't stay in one place forever. So then, therefore, we set up this phantom goal, this unrealistic goal because the alternative is too challenging for us. In other words, the alternative is simply be aware, meaning putting the effort. We want to go to Western Pure Land, we have to understand what it is, and we have to meet the criteria, the conditions. But sometimes they don't. If we don't want to put in the effort, then we just want to be happy. Then we're not being true to ourselves. So, in other words, he said here that in addition to setting up goals, we have to understand and aware of that goal. Why are we doing this? If we want to go to Western Pure Land because we hate this place is making us miserable, then you're not consistent with the Western Pure Land's thinking, because that thinking is it's not about escaping misery, right? But to be aware, to have that self-knowledge, to have that awareness. Why are we doing this? So we always end up setting up goals rather than continuing to be aware. Have that awareness, why we want to go to Western Pure Land. What is it there? So that we feel comfortable. We understand the people there. We understand the environment. We understand the way of life. And it attracts us. That's why we're there. What actually happens is that one almost invariably fails when setting up goals. The intentions, even the degree of self-knowledge, is admirable. You want to be there, but your result falters, meaning you fail. You cannot get to the goal. So in the face of the same old provocations, back again in the same old rut. I mean, we're unhappy, and then we fall back to our own selves. We try to change, but we cannot change. So why is this? So give me a few more minutes to explain to this. I think this is important. So why does this happen? The reason, he says, that we are continuing to tackle the symptoms rather than the disease. We don't know what we want. We want to have happiness, but we don't know why. What's causing us misery? What's causing unhappiness? So being unaware of the fundamental cause of our being, like bad temper, for example, as an example. We don't understand the cause of it. And if this isn't resolved, we don't know why we have bad temper. Right? We want to have happiness. Therefore, we set up a goal to go to Western Pure Land, but then we come here, go through the services, and then we don't feel to be any closer to Western Pure Land, and we give up. And we give up because we don't understand the goal, our goal, why we want to be there. We don't have that awareness of why is it that we want to be there. Is it because we want to achieve enlightenment, to save, help others? Or is it for ourselves to achieve our own happiness? So that's what he's saying here, is that we need to understand who we are and what we want in order to get there. So, the goal of happiness here is very common, but we have to understand why that we want to achieve happiness. It is because we are unhappy. But then why are we unhappy? Well, if we're unhappy at home, then we have to resolve the problems at home. You cannot set a goal of being in the Western Pure Land to solve your unhappiness at home. Because there's no direct correlation, and you won't get there because your understanding of that goal is not helping to resolve your problem at home. Talk it out with your family, or whatever the problem is, talk it out. Don't make Western Pure Land to be your goal to solve problems at home or at work, because the two won't work. We will give up because we think that going to Western Pure Land is the solution for solving problems at home, and they're not the same, right? So what he's saying here is that we have a goal, which is great, but we should also have the understanding, the awareness of why we want to have that goal and what is it causing problems. Because we have that goal because we want to overcome a problem. And what is that problem? And don't make Western Pure Land to be your solution in solving your problems at home, at work, because we haven't done our report, we haven't pay our bills, and we have misery because we have debt collectors calling us. Don't make Western Pure Land to be your goal in solving your unpaid bills. The two have nothing to do with each other, right? So spend less, pay the bills, and you feel better. You don't have to go to Western Pure Land to solve your unpaid bills, right? So essentially, that's what he's saying here is have that awareness. Okay. All right. I think that should be clear enough. I hope that has been helpful. Okay. So time is up, so we will do merit dedication. You could please join your palms. Together we recite, may the merits and virtues accrue today adorn the Buddha Pure Lands, repay 4 types of kindness above, and aid those suffering in the paths below. May those who see and hear of this bring forth the resolve for the Bodhi mind. When this retribution body is complete, together we shall meet in the land of ultimate bliss. Amitofo. You could please rise and we bow to the Buddha 3 times. Our first bow, second bow, third bow. Amitofo.